China is in a very peculiar situation because it has been, nobody can deny the success that China has achieved in controlling the COVID-19 outbreak, and also the success in avoiding, at least for the moment, a second wave. And that places China in a particular situation, in a worldly economic situation which is rather uncertain, precisely because a lot of countries are facing the challenge of this second wave of the COVID. There is no doubt that China experienced a fall in the GDP during the first part of 2020. But now there is also no doubt that China is recovering at a very substantial rate of growth. And what are the reasons of this recovery? Basically, industrial production, which has increased in the last few months much more than in the former period. But also there are signs that China is now experiences an increasing consumption. And of course, China domestic economic growth has led to an increase of imports, but a higher increase in exports. So China is experiencing, after a period where the current external surplus before the outbreak of the pandemic was practically very, very small. Now the current external surplus started increasing again, and also the exchange rate has increased by more than 5% on a yearly basis. We have to say a few things about which are the policies that China has undertaken to get out from the situation of COVID outbreak. Still in May, the Prime Minister Li Keqiang announced that the public budget deficit would increase, but not so much, only to 3.6% in 2020 with respect to 2.5% in 2019. And the expansionary fiscal policy in China this time is much less strong than it was after the crisis of 2008-2009, where China had a huge program of public investments and infrastructures. Now, the fiscal policy in China is much less strong than it was in that period, and also the monetary policy. After an initial period where there has been some more increased liquidity and lower interest rates, now the monetary strategy has become much less expansionary. So what do we have behind this prudent attitude which characterizes now the macroeconomic policy in China, which is completely different from what is happening for example, in Western countries or in other emerging countries? The impression I had is that this is due to the fact that the Chinese leadership is considering with much attention the problem of the indebtedness of the economy. There has been recently some defaults of state-owned companies that were mainly financed by debt, and the head of the Financial and Stability Committee, the Vice Premier Liu He, has declared that there will be zero tolerance approach against financial misconduct, increasing indebtedness. And also, the Chinese authorities are now introducing new rules limiting borrowing on that. However, even this prudent attitude of China in its macroeconomic policies has not prevented the growth of international demands for Chinese assets that has been clearly shown in the recent months at an international level. And this increased international demand for assets, for Chinese assets, does not seem to be stopped by some recent actions that have been taken by the Chinese regulator that have created some problems, for example, in the stock exchanges of Hong Kong and Shanghai. The most important example is the well-known stopping of the $37 billion IPO that Ant Financial, which is the financial branch of Alibaba, was prepared to launch in the two stock exchanges of Hong Kong and Shanghai, and it was stopped after Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, during a conference in Shanghai in October, the last October, declared that the Chinese banking system has a pawn shop mentality, and that has created a strong reaction, even taking into account that during the same conference in Shanghai, the vice president of China, Wang Qishan, who is the most important collaborator of Xi Jinping, was talking with a completely different approach, favoring financial regulation. So Jack Ma was summoned by a Chinese regulator in Beijing, and then the IPO was suspended. And this is not the only sign that we see in the attitude of the Chinese regulation in the financial situation of China. Because there has been, this is of course a major step, but there has been also other signs recently. For example, the Chinese regulator have issued, or they want to implement some new antitrust regulations, covering, for example, how companies use customer data, how they price their offerings, how they promote, how they want to attract customers. And also, this antitrust regulation seems particularly targeted against some tech giants that now are operating in the Chinese scenario. For example, Tencent, it is known that users are being prevented from using Tencent's WeChat Pay to purchase product in Alibaba's Taobao online stores, which is clearly exclusively closed. And now, for the first time, there are signs that the financial regulations want to intervene in that area. But how is it that this recovery, which is a short-term recovery, can be related to the long-run perspective of the Chinese economy, which is important because this is a moment in which China is starting its new fifth plan from 2021 to 2025. And the question we have to ask is how the long-run problem of the Chinese economy are addressed in this new plan. We know that one of the most important changes that have to take place in China is to correct some features of the long-run model of economic growth. For example, still increasing the share of domestic consumption and avoiding, although it is inevitable that this decrease in the share of domestic consumption will have some effects in terms of lower investment and then lower rate of growth, but the problem is how to minimize this negative effect. Then China has a problem of increasing efficiency not only in its state-owned enterprises, but also in its policies for infrastructures, although we must recognize that China has undertook new projects in new type of infrastructures related, for example, to new technologies of telecommunications and infrastructure to allow electric vehicles to function. The problem is that the infrastructures of traditional types also show a lot of signs of inefficiency, and that situation must be changed. And then there is also the problem of making economic growth more sustainable in terms of environmental aspects and social aspects. Recently, the president of China has announced to the United Nations Online Assembly that China will arrive to zero net emissions by 2060, which is a very good target. But to achieve a target like that, China has to change the situation, which sees it still too much dependent on coal, and it is not clear whether this will happen. But the declaration of Xi Jinping is anyway, it is important. In the social area, there is still a problem in China to is trying to check whether the target announced to eliminate poverty by 2020 has been really achieved, which is doubtful. But we don't have an official claim that this target has been achieved. We only have from official sources announcement that there is a research trying to check whether and how far they are from achieving this target. Now, this element of changing the economic growth model, how are they contained in the guidelines of the 14th Five-Year Plan from 2021 to 2025, which have been approved recently in the 19th session of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. And it is interesting that during that section, there is a further document has been approved, which concern a much longer period, and the title of the document is Vision 2035. Now, the 5-year plan does not contain, for the first time, does not contain any quantitative index for an aim GDP or a rate of growth. And also, these 5-year plan guidelines contain an explicit stress on one of the objectives announced by President Xi Jinping, which is that of increasing the share of domestic circulation linked to the role of domestic demand in promoting production development compared to the international circulation. This model of dual circulation has been used by Xi Jinping as a slogan for the future path of economic growth of China. And then there are other objectives which are related to the changes in the characteristic of economic growth, which I briefly mentioned before. What is interesting, however, is that no mention is made in the 5-year guidelines about the development of new technologies to make China a world leader in innovation, which is on the contrary placed as crucial objective in a longer horizon document, Vision 2035. And here, China has to face the change, the drastic change that took place in its relation with the Western countries by the Trump administration in terms of technological wars, and it is not clear what is going to happen with the new president. But what is clear is that in many sectors of the new wave of technologies, China, for example, mobile payments, e-commerce, facial recognition, electric vehicles, live streaming, China is now far ahead of the United States. But there are other crucial sectors of the digital technology frontier where China is lagging behind America. These are mainly design and manufacture of the semiconductor integrated circuits. And we still don't know, we all know about the measures against Huawei, and I don't insist on this point, but everybody knows that. But the problem is, will China be able to come out from this situation? And if China is, as we read in some recent newspaper articles, that China is probably, we don't know, will succeed in overcoming this gap, but we don't know how much it will take. And if it succeeds, this will be a way to reduce the risk of technological decoupling. This is still an open problem. We don't know how the things will end up. But we certainly know is that China has not given up its attempt to achieve a leadership position in the world economy. There are signs. There is a paper presentation later on which will discuss the Belt and Road situation of the Chinese leadership in this after COVID period. And very interesting in hearing that, because there are signs that China is slowing the loans related to the development of Belt and Road. But there are signs, but I don't know whether they could be confirmed. But what is clear is that China, there are other signs that China want to go along with his attempt to achieve this leadership position in the world economy. And the last sign, and we'll have something in the last talk of this afternoon, is the pact, the partnership signed on November 15, the so-called Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which has been signed not only among the nations, the Asian nations, but what is important, it was also signed by Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea. And this is a sign that China is now promoting a project which is the biggest trade deals in history, because it will cover an area covering a third of the world economic output. And in a situation where, after the decision of Trump to withdraw from the TPP, leave the US and also the Europe outside the way in which Asia is setting up its trading rule. And this is a risk of a further element of decoupling, which adds to the risk of a technological decoupling. And it is a sign that, on the contrary, we should see the most relevant powers in the world take significant step towards an international cooperation And I'm not sure if I have to be very optimistic on this point. Thank you very much for your attention.